at first you don't succeed, you could be better off in the long run. Well, it's not exactly as catchy as the actual saying, but it may be just as apt. As part of this week's in-depth focus report on second chances, we're looking at the benefits of failure. And as WGBH News reporter Adam Reilly shows us, some area businesses are embracing failure in surprising ways.
For many businesses in Roxbury's Dudley Square, finding customers is a struggle. But at lunchtime, Haley House Bakery Cafe hums with a strikingly diverse crowd. Some get their food to go. Others stick around to socialize or work. But this booming business isn't the only thing that makes Haley House unusual.
I was incarcerated fairly briefly for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and distribution of drugs.
Jeremy Thompson was hired at Haley House in 2011 as his prison term drew to a close. Today, he manages the restaurant and says getting a job here was a pivotal moment in his life.
And what it meant to me is that I still had a place out here in society, that people still believed in me. That meant the world to me at that time.
In fact, the vast majority of employees at Haley House, which is run by the nonprofit of the same name, have had serious brushes with the law.
There's very few people that we've hired from, we would say, well-to-do lives and well-to-do areas, because we've created this space for opportunity for people who doesn't necessarily have that.
Now, the big idea behind Haley House isn't that giving second chances is good for business. It's that, ethically speaking, it's the right thing to do. But the people who work at Haley House say it's also smart management.
And that's the beautiful thing about working with people who are coming out of incarceration, who have something to prove. People who give them an opportunity, they have a sense of loyalty to them, a sense of responsibility.
The idea that second chances make the employer-employee relationship stronger isn't unique to Haley House. Tim Rowe runs the Cambridge Innovation Center, a communal workspace for high-tech entrepreneurs, and says he's seen this dynamic firsthand.
The person who is willing to let us come back and try again is someone we're really grateful to. We have tremendous loyalty to those people.
But Rowe is more interested in the idea that professional failure can and should be beneficial. For one thing, Rowe says, that mindset lets entrepreneurs take the risks they have to.
If you are afraid of failure, then you're also afraid of trying things. So in a business, you want people to try new innovation. You want people to try new ideas to reinvent your business, because we know that if you're not reinventing your business, someone else is reinventing your business.
And when failure does occur, Rowe adds, it creates real-world wisdom that fosters success later on.
If it's in your background, if you've failed at a couple of things, then you kind of know how the world really works. You have a keener sense of what you need to do to make yourself successful.
But there's one caveat.
The only type of failure which is not really acceptable in our world is one that relates to integrity. If somebody shows a lack of integrity, if they're a liar, if they're a cheat, you don't want to work with them.
And in that sense, the Haley House approach to second chances is even more radical, because their manager, Jeremy Thompson, says the only prerequisite for redemption is a sincere desire for a fresh start.
Whoever's ready to affect and exact that change in their life, we'll take them in with open arms.
Emily, obviously we're talking about two pretty different kinds of second chances here, one involving personal setbacks or struggles, one involving professional setbacks and struggles. The common thread is the idea that in a couple radically different business situations, both those sorts of failings or struggles can be turned into an asset if someone gets a second chance.
I mean, at Haley House, they take a big leap with a guy like Thompson. I mean, his assault and battery, I mean, how much background checking did they do?
They actually interviewed him. He told me 6 or 7 times before they hired him. They did not hire him to run the restaurant. They hired him to run their catering operation. He worked his way up to what he's doing now. But they definitely did their due diligence with him, a half dozen interviews.
Wow, great. Good for them. All right. Adam, thanks for that.
Thanks.
All right, so when is failure an advantage and when is it a drawback? Daniel Eisenberg is a professor of entrepreneurship practice at Babson Global. He's also the executive director of the Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Project and author of Worthless, Impossible, and Stupid: How Contrarian Entrepreneurs Create and Capture Extraordinary Value. And welcome to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're not really buying into this whole idea that failure is somehow a good thing.
So I'll start with a confession. I'm trained, I have my PhD in social psychology, and then moved into business, investment, entrepreneurship, and so on. So I see things in a little bit more complex way. I was really struck by the subtitle, The Benefits of Failure. And, of course, anything that happens in the past, if you don't take advantage of it, well, it's a missed opportunity. So whether it's a failure or a success, then it's information to learn from. And I think the difficulty is when you look try to look into the future. And so I'm in the field of entrepreneurship. That's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. And if there's one thing that entrepreneurs really, really don't like to do, is they don't like to fail. And they do everything they can to avoid when we define failure as a total meltdown. Now,
Something
small
that doesn't get off the ground.
Well, or fails.
Yeah.
Not too far from here, use a local example, A123.
Perfect.
That was a total meltdown. That's the kind of thing that entrepreneurs desperately try to avoid. But like a lot of things, including oxygen and other substances, in smaller amounts they're beneficial, in large amounts they're toxic. So failure writ small is making mistakes. Well, entrepreneurs make mistakes every day. And without the ability to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, you're not going to be successful. But I think that's really different from catastrophic failure in a business.
Okay, so Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, always used to like to talk about his failure and his comeback. And here's a little of what he said at a commencement speech in Stanford many years ago.
I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did. Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life.
Okay, but was Steve Jobs a classic failure? Did he have a setback, or was he just a jerk and he got fired from his company?
Well, I think the results speak for themselves. I'm not going to call Stephen Jobs a jerk. He's an amazingly influential, impactful person.
But he was difficult.
But he had failures. He had abject, real business meltdowns. As I was listening to him, I had a failure in business. We created a business in 1999 that we closed in the meltdown of 2001. And it was a traumatic experience for me. It was like a piano falling down on my head in slow motion. And, if anyone wants to celebrate that, they can go ahead, but it's not a pleasant experience. But looking back on it, I think I learned things that are impossible to learn. As an entrepreneur and as a teacher and as a mentor and investor, I learned things that are impossible to learn from successes. That's very different from celebrating it or relishing it or looking for it. It happened to me. I didn't happen to it.
Yeah. I was thinking of what Tim Rowe said, the Innovation Hub guy from Cambridge, about character and integrity. So when you look at what's going on at Haley House, that's a different type. It's not really failure. It's a character flaw. It's a huge mistake. I mean, it ends up being a failure if you end up in jail, but it's a different kind, is it not?
Well, first of all, it's a heartwarming story to see it. I don't know Haley House. And I'm sure that none of the people there, if they had to choose it over again, would choose what happened to them. But most of them are the result of circumstances. They're not even basic character flaws. They're people that were in circumstances that were very, very difficult. And I think it speaks very, very well for them that they've worked themselves out of it. It's fantastic.
So this whole thing with innovation, is it like every kid in the soccer class getting a star, even if they don't know how to play the game? I mean, is it sort of like this badge of honor to be a failure as an entrepreneur? What's that about?
I don't think it's a badge of honor. And serial failures as entrepreneurs will have a lot of trouble getting resources, funding, and people to work for them. But having said that, when you look back at some of the really successful entrepreneurs, and Steve Jobs is just one example of many, that many of them have a failure in their background. And that's made them incredibly stronger and more robust as people and as entrepreneurs. But that's, again, that's very different from celebrating it or for looking for it. They tried their best, I assure you. When they're in the midst of it, they tried their best to avoid that piano crashing down on their heads.
All right, not buying it. All right, Daniel Eisenberg, thanks so much for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. All right, you can find more of our focus reports online, including an in-depth look at second chances in politics. Who gets one, who doesn't, and why? That's at WGBHnews.org.